You see, we live in a world where everyone wants the last word, the final clap back, the mic drop. But here's the truth. Just because someone says something doesn't mean it deserves your energy. Not every comment needs your attention. Not every opinion needs your acknowledgement. And not every insult needs your reaction. There's a difference between hearing someone and letting them in. There's a difference between noticing the jab and absorbing the blow. Just because you caught it doesn't mean you have to carry it. People will say things out of their own pain, out of their own insecurity, out of their need to feel important, heard, or in control. And sometimes they'll say it directly to you, loudly, publicly online, in front of others they want to show. But you're not a performer. You're not required to participate in every drama someone tries to cast you in. Sometimes silence is the strongest message you can send, because when you respond to everything, you train people to believe you're available for everything, that they can bait you anytime, that your peace is on the table whenever they feel bored or bitter. And when you constantly meet every remark with a reaction, you begin to lose your own control. Your emotions start responding to them instead of being guided by you. And that's not strength. That's surrendering power in disguise. Strength like self-control. It looks like pausing instead of pouncing. It looks like walking away without a word, even when your pride wants to speak. Especially when your pride wants to speak. Because when your response is rooted in ego, it always comes with a price. The kind of price you pay in regret, in sleepless nights, in replaying that moment over and over, wondering if it was worth it. But when your restraint is rooted in wisdom, you walk away with peace. You don't owe an apology to anyone, including yourself. See, people often confuse silence with weakness, but it's the opposite. Silence says, I'm too grounded to be shaken by this. It says, I know who I am, and I don't need to defend it to you. That's maturity. That's confidence. That's strength that doesn't shout to be seen. Think about how many times you've regretted saying something out of anger, out of impulse. Now think about how many times you've regretted staying silent. Much fewer, right? Because silence doesn't age poorly. It holds up. It protects. It doesn't give people ammunition to use against you later. Not every comment deserves a comeback, because not every person has earned access to your attention. Just because they have an opinion doesn't mean it matters. Not every critic is credible. Not every loud voice is wise. Some people speak only to provoke, not to build. They speak from wounds, not wisdom. And you're under no obligation to meet their level. Don't fight battles you've already outgrown. There's a difference between being heard and being healed. You don't need to respond to be heard, and you don't need to react to be strong. Sometimes real power looks like choosing peace over performance, letting them talk, letting them assume, letting them reveal who they are while you remain rooted in who you are. You're not here to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You're not here to argue every opinion that crosses your path. That's not your purpose. That's a distraction. So when the comment comes, and it will, ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Is this helping my growth or hijacking it? Is this bringing me closer to peace or dragging me into chaos? You'll find most of the time the answer is no. It's not worth it. It never was. You don't have to match someone's disrespect with a response. You don't have to mirror someone's immaturity with your own. Let them throw words. Let them seek attention. Let them perform. You don't need to show up. You've got better places to be, internally and externally. You've got peace to protect, growth to pursue, joy to cultivate. And that can't happen when you're constantly pulled into noise. So next time one throws a comment your way, remember, silence isn't empty. It's full of power. It's full of intention. It's full of you choosing yourself over their chaos. Not every comment deserves a comeback, and you don't need to prove anything to anyone. We've been conditioned to believe that faster is better, that if you don't react immediately, you're weak. If you don't respond right away, you're scared. If you don't make your move instantly, you've missed your chance. But that couldn't be further from the truth, because there is power in pause, wisdom in waiting, and strength in stillness. Delay is not defeat, it's discipline. Sometimes the most strategic thing you can do in a moment of pressure is nothing at all. In the first place, not avoiding it, because you're preparing, because you know the value of a measured response over a messy reaction, because you understand that clarity doesn't come in the heat of the moment. It comes after the emotion has settled. You see, when you delay a response, you're not surrendering, you're observing, you're gathering data, reading the room, letting the full picture develop before you act. That's not weakness. That's emotional intelligence. That's maturity. You don't have to rush to react just because someone else is rushing to provoke. Their urgency is not your responsibility. Their chaos doesn't dictate your timeline. You are allowed to take a breath, a dake, whatever you need to respond from a place of control rather than confusion. Some people are so uncomfortable with stillness that they mistake calm for indecision. They mistake patience for fear. They'll say you're stalling, that you're backing down, that you're not handling. But what they don't realize is you are handling it, just not in a way that entertains their dysfunction. When you take your time, you're saying, I won't be rushed into regret. Because how many times have you answered in the heat of the moment and wished you hadn't? Sent the message, said the words, slammed the door, only to realize later what I needed wasn't to respond louder, it was to respond later. The truth is, decisions made in urgency are rarely rooted in wisdom. They're emotional, they're reactive, and they usually cost more than they're worth. But when you delay for in the first place, you create sight for calm, for discernment. You give your future self a chance to show up with perspective. You shift from impulse to intention, risk in the first place. And there's something powerful about intention. When you're intentional, your words carry weight. Your actions have meaning in the first place. You're not just reacting to what's happening. You're choosing how you want to shape what happens next. Think about nature. Some of the most powerful forces take their time. Mountains didn't rise overnight. Trees don't grow in an hour. Oceans don't change tides in a minute, but they evolve. They impact everything around them. Quietly, powerfully, consistently. You don't have to rush to prove your strength. Sometimes saying not yet is the strongest thing you can do. Sometimes waiting is the win, because in that delay, you're getting clear on your values. You're making sure your response reflects your growth, not your ego. You're choosing peace over performance. And let's be honest, some people want you to react fast because they know that fast reactions are sloppy. They want the outburst, the mistake, the words you can't take back. That's their game. Don't play it. Your delay is your protection. It shields your peace. It gives you space to breathe, to think, to choose your next step with intention, not intimidation. It doesn't mean you're ignoring the issue. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're wise enough to know that pressure doesn't equal priority. You decide what gets your energy and when. So the next time someone tries to rush your answer, provoke a quick response, or push you into a reaction, pause. Remind yourself, delay is not defeat. It's a decision. A decision to wait for the right time, the right tone, and the right mindset. A decision to protect your integrity. A decision to lead with clarity, not chaos. Because at the end of the day, what matters most isn't how fast you responded, it's how well you did. And the best responses, they don't come from the heat of the moment. They come from the calm after the storm. Delay is not defeat. It's strength under control. It's easy to fall into the trap of looking outside ourselves for approval. To seek applause for our decisions, recognition for our efforts, and affirmation for who we are. We're taught early on that our worth is reflected in the reactions of others, how many likes we get, how many compliments we hear, how many people agree with our choices. But here's the truth most people don't say out loud, the kind of validation that lasts, the kind that holds you up when no one's clapping, can't come from outside. It has to come from within. When your self-worth depends on other people's opinions, your confidence becomes a moving target. One day you're up, the next you're questioning everything. Why? Because you've given strangers the power to define your value. You've handed them the pen and said, write my identity for me. But they don't know your full story. They don't see your silent battles, your quiet resilience, your daily growth. So why let them shape your self-perception? Real validation starts with you knowing your own worth before the world ever affirms it. It's looking in the mirror and saying, I'm proud of who I'm becoming. Even when no one else says it. It's doing the right thing when no one's watching. It's showing up consistently, authentically, and kindly, without needing applause to make it feel real. Because external validation is temporary. It's loud and fast, but it fades. One moment, they're cheering you on. The next, they've moved on to something or someone else. If you build your identity on that, you'll constantly be chasing something that was never meant to anchor you in the first place. You were not created to live for claps. You were built to stand tall, even in silence, to walk confidently, even when you're misunderstood, to know your worth, even when it's not being acknowledged. Validation is an inside job because no one else knows the full context of your journey. They see the result, you've lived the process. They see the smile, you've felt the struggle. They see the win, you've survived the wilderness that led to it. That's why their opinion can't define you. It's incomplete. You've got to stop outsourcing your peace. If someone's praise lifts you up, their criticism can just as easily bring you down. But when your validation is rooted internally, their noise, positive or negative, doesn't shake your foundation. You become steady. You become free. And no, this doesn't mean you close yourself off to encouragement or support. It just means you stop depending on it. You receive it with gratitude, but not desperation. You can appreciate the compliment without needing it to believe in yourself. That's the difference. Too many people are living in emotional debt because they've built their confidence on borrowed opinions. They wait for someone to notice them before they notice themselves. They wait for applause to feel accomplished, but you don't need permission to be proud of who you are. You don't need a consensus to trust your intuition. You don't need likes to love yourself. Some of the best decisions you'll ever make won't make sense to others. Some of your greatest growth will go unseen, and some of your hardest work won't be celebrated. But it will be worth it because you didn't do it for them. For your peace, your purpose, your healing, in your future. That's why validation must start within, because when it does, you're no longer a prisoner to public opinion. You're no longer waiting for someone else to say you matter. You've already know it. You've already decided it. And that kind of confidence, it's unshakable. It walks into rooms differently. It sets boundaries unapologetically. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't compete. It just is quiet, strong, grounded. So if you're waiting for someone to tell you're enough, let this be it you are, not because someone else said so, but because you believe it. And that belief, that's where true power lies, not in the echo of others' voices, but in the sound of your own. Validation is an inside job. And once you truly own that, nothing outside of you can take it away. In the first place, they don't require applause. They don't demand a big announcement. And they certainly don't need to be explained to everyone watching. A boundary is not a performance. It's a decision, quiet, firm, personal. It doesn't exist for others to approve of. It exists to protect your peace. You don't have to make a scene to set a standard. You don't need to raise your voice to reinforce your value. The strength of a boundary isn't found in how loud you are. It's in how consistent you are. When you say no and stick to it. When you walk away and don't look back. When you choose your well-being over someone else's comfort, even if they don't understand. Because boundaries aren't about controlling other people. They're about taking responsibility for yourself. For your time, your energy, your emotional safety. And that's something everyone will get. Some people will feel offended by your boundary because they were benefiting from your lack of one. They'll say you're being distant, cold, difficult. But what they're really saying is you're no longer easy to take advantage of. That's not your problem. In the first place, you weren't put here to make everyone comfortable. You're not obligated to keep others happy at the cost of your own mental and emotional health. There comes a point where your silence, your distance, your refusal to engage, it all becomes a boundary in itself, a quiet line in the sand that says, I'm no longer available for what drains me. And you don't need to explain that, because boundaries aren't for them. They're for you. They're not about changing someone else's behavior. They're about changing your own patterns, about recognizing where you've been overextending, over-explaining, and overcompensating just to maintain relationships that leave you empty. You don't owe people a press release every time you grow. You can just grow. You can step back from a conversation without declaring a reason. You can choose not to reply without feeling guilty. You can walk away from disrespect without defending your choice, because your worth isn't up for discussion. Your peace doesn't need a justification, and your boundaries are not a debate. You teach people how to treat you, not with dramatic speeches, but with consistent action, with what you tolerate, with what you allow, with how you show up for yourself when others don't. And yes, it might feel lonely at first. Setting boundaries often does, especially when you've spent your life people pleasing, when you've been the one who always said yes, even when it cost you, when you've kept quiet to keep the peace, all while losing your own. But here's what's waiting on the other side of that discomfort: self-respect. The kind that doesn't need validation. The kind that's rooted in knowing what you deserve. The kind that no longer sacrifices your mental and emotional well-being just to be liked in the first place. That's the power of silent boundaries. You're not slamming doors. You're not creating chaos. You're just choosing you. You're choosing to stop engaging with what exhausts you, to stop over-explaining your worth, to stop showing up where you're not seen. And the people who truly care, they won't need a grand explanation. They'll feel the shift and respect it. They'll notice the change and honor it. Because they understand that growth isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like distance, like fewer replies, like more time alone, like space, and that's okay. You don't need to post about it. You don't need to justify it. You don't need to turn it into a spectacle. All you need is clarity, conviction, and the courage to follow through. Because boundaries don't need an audience to be real. They don't need to be seen to be strong. They just need to be honored by you, quietly, consistently, intentionally. And when you learn to set those boundaries without guilt, without drama, and without a crowd, you step into a kind of peace that doesn't depend on who's watching. You don't have to explain your healing. You just have to protect it. Let your actions speak louder than your explanations. Let your silence draw the line they never saw coming in the first place. Because the loudest boundary is the one you no longer break for anyone. And that doesn't need an audience. It just needs you.